This is the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. We're talking about last year, 2011 and 2012 coming up. Let's go to a caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. Richard Hollowell calling in.
Richard, how are you doing, sir?
Very good.
Well, tell us where you are from and what you do, Richard.
Well, Doug, I am in Newport Beach, California. I am with a group known as the Resnick Group, which is a top 20 accounting and advisory firm with 11 offices around the country. And as you well know, I've spent 40 years dealing with troubled real estate held by banks, insurance companies, governmental agencies such as the FSLIC, RTC, FDIC, and a variety of other acronyms. And my practice goes throughout the country, assisting lenders, assisting developers, property owners, portfolio owners, and, of course, most recently lawyers that are involved in troubled real estate of all types.
Well, how do you assist them, Richard?
Well, it really depends on the desire and the need of whether it's a borrower or a lender. We usually get called in when there's a combustible moment. That's what I call it. When something really has gone wrong in a real estate transaction where a lender and a borrower are at an impasse, and on one side of the ball or another will be called in kind of as a mediator or a restructuring artist to try to come up with a solution that works for all, so that a protracted piece of litigation doesn't get filed and dragged through the courts for 2 or 3 years. And we're actually involved in a couple of those cases as expert witnesses right now. So I guess with some of the wisdom that we've gained over 40 years watching the behaviors, whether it's on the bank side or the insurance company side or the borrower side, we have some pretty good luck in bringing people to a table to come to a resolution, whether it's a restructure or a turnover of a property on some kind of a basis.
Well, experience counts, that's for sure. Give us, and I know it's difficult, but 2011, you work across the country. Tell us about what happened in the real estate market on a national scene.
Well, it's interesting, Doug, if you asked that question to 1,000 experts this year, you'd probably get 1,000 different answers.
I'm asking you, Rich. Tell us what you think, because that's why I have you on the show. You are a leader in the real estate community.
Yeah. Well, from my perspective, there's probably 2 or 3 points that are key here. It was another very bad year for single-family residential real estate. I was just looking through some statistics. 46% of the homes that sold in November were still short sales or REO. Mm-hmm. When you take a look at more than 6 million homeowners that are 30 or more days past due on their loans, right, we're in for another bad year coming up. In most areas, prices still haven't quite reached bottom. So, the single-family residential sector continued to languish throughout 2011, almost no matter where you are. Second, it's my guess from dealing with a lot of banks that only about 25% of banks are really through their real estate problems. We're now 5 years into the residential mess, and we're probably 3 years or so into the commercial downturn, particularly in hotel, office buildings, the retail sector. And really what that means is that 75% of the banks are still struggling with loan extensions, what I call second defaults. These are loans that have already been restructured but are now defaulting again, and maybe having to go into a foreclosure or a loan sale or some other type of resolution. Third, in 2011, we saw an increased volume of distress residential and commercial sides. Now, with that said, we're still nowhere near having a market clearing of all the distress that's out there, but we have seen movement of properties, in many cases, particularly on the side of the CMBS lenders, who oftentimes have pocket buyers or folks that they have dealt with that they feel comfortable moving a distressed asset to without actually taking it out to the market. So there has been some market clearing. And I guess the fourth thing that I saw personally in 2011 was a real outbreak of all kinds of real estate-related litigation. And why has that happened? It's really happened because in many cases, whether it's a limited partner or whether it's a bank or a mezz lender, folks in many cases have been pushed to a position of now being able to quantify their losses, and now they're looking around the table to see who they could blame, who they could collect from potentially. We've seen an outbreak of litigation against officers and directors of failed banks. These suits are put on by the FDIC to a great extent. Looking at insurance money, the officers and directors' policies. We're in fact working on 2 of the 17 cases that have already been filed, and if you look on the FDIC website, there's another 300 plus lawsuits coming. So folks have been able to quantify their losses, and they're looking at how they can collect. And we saw that starting to happen. We've actually had 8 or 9 expert testifying cases during the 2011 period.
You brought up a couple of terms that we have a pretty knowledgeable listener base, but we also have general public. Tell us what CMBS means.
Well, those are commercial mortgage-backed securities, and that was a phenomena that really got started in the RTC days, where a bundle of loans would be originated, and in round numbers, take 100 commercial loans backed by office buildings. Those loans would then be bundled into a security and offered out to the public to buy different tranches or different levels of risk in those securities. And to the extent that many of those were generated from the 2003 to 2007 era, as they mature, many of those are underwater. And the special servicers, those that have to handle the problem for the securitized note holders, are the ones that have to resolve with the borrower collecting on those loans.
Okay, and there was another term you said, mezz lender. What's a mezz lender?
Well, a mezzanine lender is one that falls behind a senior lender. Senior lender would be somebody that has a first mortgage that might go up to a 70% loan to value. The mezzanine lending industry was very hot in the 2000s, where you could borrow up to 15, maybe 20% of the value of a property, stacking that on top of the senior lender.
Yep.
In essence, reducing the equity that a developer or a property purchaser might have at the point of purchase of a property.
Spreading the risk.
Spreading the risk.
2012. What is your gut feel for us in the profession? What's going to be the hot spots, and how are we going to not only survive but prosper in this business?
Well, I see. I actually just had an article published recently talking about 2012 predictions, and there were 4 or 5 key points in there. I'll kind of run through these really quick on a bullet.
Richard? What article and what was the source?
I will send you a link to that
article.
It was in an online publication. But basically, it was outlook and opportunities for 2012,
Okay.
and a few of the key points
Right.
were, number one, like 2011, 2012 doesn't look good for job growth. Corporations will continue to function in a real frugal manner, and lending standards will remain very tight, which to me means that lenders that are already in a real estate credit are probably stuck there and going to have to deal with things as they mature or default. Second, there's about $1.4 trillion of commercial real estate loans that are going to mature between now and 2014, and some 40% of those are underwater. So, we'll see more loan extensions. We'll see borrowers look to for more equity. We'll see more note and REO sales. And again, going back to the CMBS lenders, we'll see a good portion of that in their basket. Third, and I haven't said a lot of bright things about real estate for the last 5 or 6 years, but I really see multifamily development taking off in 2012. That's actually one of the very strongest suits of the Resnick Group, because they're actually one of the premier authorities on low-income housing tax credits to get development deals off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But with homeownership having reached a peak of about 70% in 2007, if you consider those folks that have already been foreclosed on or that are now 90 days or more delinquent, homeownership has dropped from about 70% to just under 60%. And that is a huge quantum shift in where people are going to be living over the next 4 or 5 years. That's a lot of multifamily demand. So I do think that you're going to see new projects going. So those that might have a piece of land that might be suited for a low-income project or a market-rate project might dust off those plans that they had put together 4 or 5 years ago and say, maybe this is feasible now. So I do see that breaking out all over the country.
So more renters, because number one, they got in trouble with the last house, and now they can't find financing, basically. So they're looking for rental apartments and condos, and this is where this all growth is coming from.
Yep, absolutely. And there's a lot of good statistical data out there showing that there's a growing demand for rental housing, really of all types. Folks ought to heed that, because I think there's a real opportunity there. And that of course, trickles down to the property management side, the leasing side, the entitlement side, the design side for architects. So I think that is a good opportunity for next year. And I know you're down in Florida, Doug. I do think that during this next year, you're going to start to see a lot of the baby boomers who are getting ready to retire that haven't been really damaged by this economic downturn. I think you're going to see them head to the Sun Belt states to buy their retirement homes, because prices are really rock bottom. I lived down there for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and the home that I built in 1995, you could buy it at the same price today, and we're approaching 2012, and I think that's really profound. And I think folks should take a look at the great values that are around. If they're ready to retire, they have an ability to sell their house, or they've got some cash and want to retire. There's some great bargains, particularly all over the Sun Belt.
Well,
I guess.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the wild card in all predictions for 2012 is really surrounding, what's this global economy doing, and where do we go with political unrest? Whether it's Iran or Iraq or Russia or North Korea, you've got these little combustible pots of uncertainty boiling around the world, and I'm not sure who can predict what's going to go on there, or exactly how it might affect real estate. But if we stick to fundamentals, what we do best, I think people can have a pretty good year in 2012.
Well, it's a changing world, that's for sure. It's become smaller, but we're having a lot of international buyers, which really helps us, and that's a good thing. You talked about Florida. That's where you and I met. We did an auction together 20 years ago, I believe, down in Miami. That was very successful for a multifamily property that was hurt by a storm. And again, it was wonderful to work with you, and we were successful. So that was a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. That was one of many troubled assets we handled for the RTC way back when. But the best thing to come out of a long career like this is the relationships that we built. And I do appreciate Dec and you asking me to be on the program. And I'm wishing you the best for 2012 for sure.
Absolutely. Same to you. Tell us how people can get a hold of you, Rich.
Well, I can be reached by email at richard.hollowell@Reznick, that's REZNICK group.com. Of course, our website is www.reznickgroup.com, and my best number is always my cell number, which is 213-631-6116. And as I mentioned, our practice is national in nature, and would love to see if we can assist any of the folks that are program listeners.
Richard, thank you so much for calling in. You have a great 2012.
All right. You too. Thanks, Doug.
Take care.
Bye now.